The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwar and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we will be answering listener emails from our gigantically exploding email bag. We have a question from Thomas, who lives in Manchester, England. And Thomas asks, it's being reported here that the US and China have come to a deal regarding tariffs. We here understand that the deal, putting that in quotes, between the UK and US, agreed to by the UK's Prime Minister Starmer, wasn't even close to what the US President Trump reported it was. That is my understanding also, Thomas. We've heard very different things between the United States and the UK. Is this new deal, again in quotes, between the US and China real? If so, does this mean the trade war is over? And who do you think won it? And no, the trade war is not over, and war is a very poor way to describe it because there are no winners in a trade war. It's not a war in that sense. So, Mark, Scott, what do you say?
This is all you, Scott. This has got economics written all over it. This is all you.
Well, so if the question is about the UK and the United States, which I think at least part of it was,
right.
When Trump entered office, the tariff rate was 2.5%. And Trump has agreed to lower a 27.5% auto tariff to 10% for 100,000 cars made in the UK exported to the United States, which is about what they exported in 2024. So, in addition, the UK agrees to buy $10 billion worth of US airplanes, which have Rolls-Royce engines in them, apparently, to enter our country duty-free, and that they're going to eliminate a 25% tariff on UK steel and aluminum exports. The whole deal itself, the whole trade war. Let me try to figure this out as I'm speaking about it. The whole trade war was that there were tiny tariffs, 2.7, below 4%, okay, that somehow got inflated in Trump's febrile imagination to like 65% tariffs, because he wasn't calculating tariffs, he was calculating trade deficits and surpluses. And that he's going to create these huge tariffs, but they're not going to be actual tariffs. They're simply negotiating starting points, and then they'll come down. So even before he's met with the Chinese government about tariffs, he's lowered it from, 145% to 30% or something like that, which is still way out of whack with what it was before he took office, when I believe China was tariffing imports from the US at like 1.8% or 2.2% or something along those lines. And now it's whatever it is. The confusion, I believe, is deliberate. I don't think that he's dealing with a full deck when it comes to this kind of stuff. When it comes to trade, Trump is completely out of his depth. He doesn't seem to understand that tariffs are paid by importers, which in the United States are corporations generally, and then sometimes passed along to consumers. Sometimes they'll take less profit. It's kind of up to them. in a free market system, but that ultimately it's not coming from China, it's not coming from the UK or other any other countries. And he continues to insist that, that in his first term in office, we got, I don't know, sometimes it's as much as $1 trillion, sometimes it's as much as $80 billion in tariffs from China. If that's not confusing enough, I would say that the reasons he's misdiagnosing the reasons why people aren't buying things from the United States as being tariff based when in fact they are not. And the UK is a perfect example of this. The UK bans imports of US beef, for example, from cattle that are raised with artificial growth promoting hormones, right? And that the food standards in the UK are stronger than they are here in the States, which is disgusting and sickening enough. But they're not going to relax their standards, but they will try to import more of our beef as long as it's not full of hormones. It just seems to me that this whole thing is a misread of the international trade situation, and that if you want to go after China for the abuses, the real abuses that their government does to U.S. products, that's fine. But what does that have to do with making a T-shirt and sending it over here? Again, he's muddled this trade situation so badly that it's almost impossible to tell whether somebody is winning or losing, because as Brooks said at the beginning, everybody loses in a trade war, and there are no winners. The consumers are losing, prices go up, corporations make less profit. That's not necessarily a good thing. I've done business in the UK with an American company, and they rely on us for a lot of computer services and things like that, financial services. So, trying to simplify a complicated situation is always a difficult task, but Trump has screwed it up so badly that nobody is ever going to understand what, who, no, there are going to be no winners. Let's be clear about that. But who's losing and why? Is that as clear as mud or what?
That is as clear. That is absolutely as clear as mud. I think if you want to have the answer of who won and who's winning and who's losing, and whether or not this is real, they have recently been showing the port of Seattle empty, a bunch of West Coast ports empty, and that's not good. And they were talking to the harbor master of the port of Seattle, who basically said, "I've never seen it like this. They are getting nothing in." So think about that. Those are two very, very busy ports. I can't remember the other one. It's down by, I believe, by San Francisco or Los Angeles. These are busy ports of that goods come in, and if you've got no ships coming into them, that tells you a lot. That does tell you a lot. That eventually catches up. Remember the supply chain issue that we had during COVID. Well, this is a self-inflicted supply chain issue. Has it caught up with the American economy at this point in time? Not quite yet. Not quite yet. And we see the economy up and down. We see the stock market, when this was announced the other day, went way up. It has been going up. But because we've always said the stock market reacts not on reality, it reacts on emotions. And the fact is this is only a 90-day hiatus. This isn't permanent. So is it over with? No. I mean, I don't believe so. Is it because the ports were empty and people are seeing it even on Fox News that the ports are empty? I think that's a good possibility. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Trump administration basically backed down. And that's really what it comes down to. Anybody that wants to paint it any other way, you could do, you can, put as much lipstick on that pig as you like. The fact is that Trump backed down, and probably for a good reason, because let's face it, uh, empty ports on the West Coast, which is stuff coming from China and from Japan, and one of the places we get most of our stuff from, and Mexico. That's a big deal. So, yeah, I think again they're going to paint it any way they can, but the fact is that empty ports is a telling sign, especially when Fox News shows it on their network.
You would kind of think at this point that Trump would get the idea and back off altogether. But he doesn't, like, because just yesterday, I think he mentioned again how much money his first term took in from China, as if China actually paid these tariffs, which we understand is a ridiculous idea and not what a tariff is. So I think, we were talking earlier in another segment that we're recording today about the airplane from Qatar, right? That's the kind of stuff Trump wants. He wants he wants national leaders from around the world, international leaders, to give him tribute, to pay him something for his largesse in allowing them to do business with America. And he wants to be able to do business in their countries, opening golf courses and hotels. His fascination with Putin goes back to opening a hotel in Moscow that he always hoped to do, and in fact was negotiating during the 2016 campaign and lying to the American people about. That's what he's seeing as tariffs and trade wars, and he's looking at tribute and saying tariffs. And I think he just wants to be paid off.
And that's to him personally, not for the American people. And the last I had heard about the empty ports that you mentioned, Mark, was Trump was saying, well, that's a good thing. Even to the fact that truck drivers and people who work on the ports unloading the ships and so forth, that they were going to lose their jobs. Well, Trump didn't care about that. What he pointed to was all the money we are saving by not purchasing anything from China. And he doesn't seem to understand that people losing their jobs means that the economy in the United States essentially grinds to a halt because there is nothing to purchase and no jobs for people who work in those industries. I mean, the money has to circulate, so there has to be something for it to circulate with. And I wanted to make a couple of other points. You asked about the deal with the UK and the US. And as I understand it, Starmer was not prepared at all for any kind of announcement of a deal. And essentially, Trump went from 10% to charging the UK in tariffs to 10% charging the UK in tariffs. The cars that are exempted are Jaguars and Aston Martins and the Mini Cooper, which are beyond the price range of many, if not most, Americans at this point. We, the United States, have a trade surplus with the UK. And one of Trump's big bugaboos was trade deficits. Well, we have a trade surplus. So why on earth, and also with Australia, so why on earth we would be tariffing a nation that we have a trade surplus with when the alleged rationale was to tariff countries that we have a deficit with? And then, of course, prior to that, it was fentanyl, and prior to that, it was immigrants. And so the rationale kept shifting as, of course, things do with Trump. And then it becomes deficits, but now we don't even have deficits. And those nations are being targeted. And Trump would then have another reason, well, they're treating us badly, as you said, Scott, over beef. They won't take our beef, and they won't this, and they won't that. So that's a reason to put tariff. I mean, none of it makes any sense. So the deal with China, I don't even know if it is a deal. So we're over here, all three of us on the East Coast, take a while to load. They take several weeks, I think, to cross. Ships from China take several weeks to cross the Pacific. Then they have to get to port. Then they have to be unloaded. Then they have to drive across the country. It takes at least, I think, 55 days to get from West Coast to East Coast driving by truck. And then they all have to be unloaded and put on the shelves. So even if trade starts up immediately with China, it's going to be several months before we see anything here on the East Coast from China. And if a person is a businessman, a person doesn't know whether to load up a truck, load up anything in a shipping container, unless it's ready to go now. But I mean, a person doesn't know whether to, as a business person, whether to wait, whether to ship it now, because Trump is so volatile. I mean, he could decide, nope, we're not doing 90 days now. Next week, we're putting the 145 back on because China didn't do this or that. And China has basically made no changes whatsoever. They're just waiting. I mean, and they can wait. They can outwait us. There's no question about that. And they have not called Trump. They don't have to do anything. China has other countries it can sell to, and the American public are the ones who are going to pay the ultimate price, and we will be the ones who lose. And Trump, in principle, again, does not seem to understand how trade works, international trade works, or any kind of trade works. And unless he suddenly develops more than one brain cell, which I don't see happening, what happens, as you said, Scott, in 90 days, he's not going to suddenly understand international economics. So where are we? Right back where we started from. I mean, nobody knows the answer, and that's the problem. And businesses cannot cannot make decisions on that. And as far as bringing manufacturing and bringing all these things back to the United States, not only do we not have the materials to build all that, and there are tariffs like on India, Indian and steel and this and that and the other thing, people are not thinking about the amount of energy we'd have to put back into our grid to run all this, run all these factories and run all this stuff. We don't have the electrical power. At least I don't think we do. Where's all that going to come from? And there's no answer to that either. I don't even know if anybody's really asking that question. So,
okay.
Anything else from anybody else? I do have a suggestion for our listener. I will put a link. Mark, I'll give you a link to an economist that I've been listening to, who explains things clearly. And
much more clearly than I explained it.
And he's interesting he's from Australia. He works at the University of Michigan. And he's been on a lot of programs lately, and he speaks.
Justin Wolfers, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Justin Wolfers. And I listened to him on the Bulwark yesterday, and he was on for about an hour. And I'll give you the link to put in there. I suggest listening to him. He is very clear and specific, very good at making what can be a very thick subject understandable and interesting. So if no one has anything else, I hope that we answered your question, Thomas. And thank you for listening from the UK. We appreciate it, and do stay safe. And we hope to see all of our listeners again next time. Thank you so much, and do take care.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social-political issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.